All right, the New England Patriots are going to be drafting number 3 overall. And while, things have changed in the past and whoever knows for sure, it seems very likely that Caleb Williams and Drake May will be off the table, meaning that they will have a choice between do they go quarterback and make it 3 straight quarterbacks, or do they take the best non-quarterback off the board? And really there's quarterback and receiver are the 2 ways they could realistically go here. As for the quarterbacks, you see next to everyone's name, I have the where they rank on the consensus big board. You see Jaden Daniels is kind of the main guy people are talking about. A lot of people do really like Jaden Daniels. JJ McCarthy, another guy people like. Hey, maybe don't want to keep the Michigan thing going. Worked out well last time with Brady. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., maybe you could hope to try to get them in round 2 as an option. Probably not going to draft those guys. I really think the main guy you're looking at here is Daniels. Also for receiver, while there has been some debate with Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze as, being potentially wide receiver 1, seems like most people have Marvin Harrison Jr., and most people view him to be this elite level prospect. So while I'm saying wide receiver versus quarterback, it really does kind of feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Daniels is the discussion as it stands right now. I've made a whole film study on both of these guys, so you can check those out if you want to hear my thoughts on them a little bit more in depth. But I think first before we get into the discussion about how good they are and, drafting that way, I think we have to talk about drafting quarterback versus non-quarterback, because the way I kind of view this is there is nothing more valuable than getting an elite quarterback in the NFL, especially if you can get an elite quarterback on a rookie deal. And so if you think a guy has a chance to be that, it's way more valuable than even a guaranteed elite player at a different position. The comparison I would make is if you had 2 lottery tickets, one lottery ticket gives you a 1 in 3 chance at winning $100. The other lottery ticket gives you a 90% chance at winning $5. Well, the one with a 1 in 3 chance at $100, that's going to be the more valuable ticket. So that's kind of how I view it. Well, let's get into kind of some categories and talk about just different prospects in general and how I would view it going into the draft. So the obvious number 1, the most important thing to draft would be an elite quarterback prospect. If there's an elite quarterback prospect, they should always be going before anything else. These are the Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. Like Jameis Winston was considered that at the time, right? They're not always going to hit, but they should probably always be going first overall. Or if they're going second overall, it's because there's another elite quarterback prospect that's drafted in front of them. That's usually how you would view that. And then I would say the great quarterback prospects should be number 2. Now, kind of the highest odds you would ever give a quarterback prospect of hitting is about 1 in 3. That tends to be their hit rate at best, even like for first overall pick guys. So these guys might be 25 to 30% chance of hitting, but still are probably worth it if they're that good of a prospect to be drafted over, I would say, 99% of situations. You should probably draft one of those guys instead of someone who isn't the elite non-quarterback. However, then I would say that's when you would want to go for the elite non-quarterback prospects. Not at any position, obviously. Kickers probably wouldn't go here, right? But, this is where a Marvin Harrison Jr. usually would make sense. So that's kind of how you would view that. Finally, you would then go to the quarterbacks who have a chance. Like I think about Mac Jones as kind of an example of this, a quarterback who isn't necessarily like, oh, we got to draft him, but like we could maybe draft him. Like Justin Fields, another example. Patrick Mahomes was a guy who was viewed in this category at the time, right? A guy who, the odds are lower than 20% for them. They might be like 10 or 5%, but it's still probably worth it over getting a great prospect at a different position. And then everybody else, right? Again, a lot is based on quarterbacks because it's a quarterback-driven league at this point. So that's kind of how I typically view how the draft should go if you are someone who exists in a vacuum and is just trying to get the best player. So let's go back to the quarterbacks for a second. So I think let's just assume Marvin Harrison Jr. is an elite prospect. Some people are going to disagree, but I think he's amazing. I think he's really good. I think viewing him as a potential number 3 overall pick is totally fine, and viewing him as an elite prospect that isn't a quarterback feels fair. To me, the question then is not, does Jaden Daniels have as good of a chance at hitting as Harrison Jr.? Because I think that Harrison Jr. is has a much higher chance of hitting than Daniels. The question, though, is does Daniels have that 25 to 30% chance of hitting that you hope out of the kind of second tier, in some years, first tier quarterback level prospects? What do you think there? For me, I'm not as high on Daniels as some other people, so I would probably be a little bit less likely to draft him number 3 overall. But I would say if you view Daniels as maybe, a lot of people viewed, I don't know, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young last year, then absolutely they should draft him and pass up on an elite level prospect. That's usually how I view things, because no matter how good Marvin Harrison Jr. Is as a prospect, it's still probably not worth it to draft him over a guy who could be a, potential star quarterback. But this chart is where I kind of second guess that a little bit. So again, kind of to reiterate, my typical philosophy is that if you are drafting a quarterback who is a really good prospect, it's pretty much always worth it. But you look at, these are the offensive PFF grades for each positional category for New England. Passing was bad, but receiving was really tough. Pass blocking was really tough. Running was all right. And what I have made some sort of subtle moves to fix this. Some of those moves I even like. They got a long ways to go. And the number one predictor of success for young quarterbacks is situation drafted into. This isn't a good situation to be drafted into. So if you're kind of on the fence about if Daniels is going to hit or not anyway, for me personally, and I don't know if that's what they are, maybe they love Daniels and want to draft him. For me, as someone who isn't as high on Daniels, it's kind of a no-brainer that I would draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, again, quarterback prospect evaluations is notoriously difficult, and especially when it's me trying to do it, right? I've certainly missed on plenty, so I don't think I'm necessarily right about that. I think Daniels could hit. It's certainly possible, but I do think that especially given kind of the situation that New England is in on top of things, that's where things get very tricky. It's kind of the age-old question, right? Of do you go after the franchise quarterback and then try to build around them, or do you try to build a good roster and then add the quarterback as kind of the last piece? Like you see Chicago now, where they're doing with Caleb Williams, and listen, it makes it easier when you trade for a future first-round pick that ends up being the first overall pick. Makes it easier to do this, but still, they build a good roster, and then they can go out and hopefully get the quarterback. One of the issues with that is kind of what I mentioned, though, which is if they go out and do some, if the Patriots become a decent roster, they probably won't be in position to get a great quarterback in a future year. So that's where things get a little bit tricky, and that's why usually I'm always in favor of just draft a good quarterback. If they end up sucking, well, then you can draft a good quarterback with your next pick, because you'll still be bad. Whereas if they, if that doesn't happen, then if they're good, then cool, you got a good quarterback, well done. But I do wonder if you almost look at this offensive situation and say, okay, usually you're not going to be in a great situation when you're getting drafted number 3 overall, but this might be even a worse situation than you typically get. For me personally, again, kind of to reiterate, I'm not a huge Jaden Daniels fan, so I probably wouldn't draft him number 3 overall. If I was, though, I think I would draft him number 3 overall, but I would also be going out trying to add receivers, make a trade if you have to. Again, do what Chicago did. They made a conscious effort to help out their receiving core. Doesn't mean Caleb Williams is going to hit, but it gives him a better chance to. I'm just worried that if the Patriots draft Jaden Daniels, it's going to be a Bryce Young situation where he has really nothing that he can do to show if he's good or not. He looks bad. Everyone says he sucks, even if, really it's not a fair evaluation of a player. And then they have to next year go out and get other pieces. It is worth mentioning, though, it's easier to go out next year and get a good receiver than it will be to go out and get a good quarterback potentially. Because we don't know where they're going to be drafting. But that's kind of my thought on all of that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.